welcome. My name's Suryagupta, and I'm going to be co-leading the class with Devamitra. At least I'm going to be hosting Devamitra this evening, and joining in as well. So just welcome, and we'll hear in a moment, you know, who you are. Just say your name, where you're calling in from. Really lovely for you to join us. I have, you can see, maybe you can't see actually, but there's Devamitra is in the shrine room. I'm at home, you know, teaching from here. And then in the shrine room as well, we have our wonderful tech team this evening. It's Polly and Alexandra. So Polly and Alexandra, do you want to just say hi so we can hear you?
Hi everyone.
Okay, thanks. That's Alexandra, I think. And Devamitra.
Hello, it's Polly here.
Oh, hi Polly. Hi Polly, great. And Devamitra?
Yeah, hello everybody. Very happy to be here.
Great. So what's going to happen this evening, we'll start in properly in a moment, but it'd be really just great to hear and say hi to you. We'll have a meditation. I'll introduce the session, then we'll have meditation. And then Devamitra will talk around this theme, our theme for this evening. And it's a very important theme, and I'm personally looking forward to hearing what Devamitra has got to say. I'll say more about that in a moment. And then we'll have a short tea break, and then afterwards there'll be a Q&A. So let's just see who's here, say hi, you know, and maybe Alexandra, Polly can let us know who's already tuning in.
Harvey is there. Alison. Can you hear me?
Harvey and Alison.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin.
Ruby.
Ruby.
Where are they calling in from? Be good to know where people are calling in from as well.
Well, Kashmitra is calling from London, presumably.
Oh, hi, Kashmitra. Hi there.
Kathy from Oxfordshire.
Kathy from Oxfordshire.
Oxfordshire. Mm-hmm.
Paul in Brighton.
Paul in Brighton.
Great. One of the things I've loved about, you know, being able to be on Zoom and on YouTube is just people coming from all over and people we wouldn't normally get to see and get to, you know, teach. So welcome if you're local, and welcome if you're distant to us geographically. But you're right here now with us, so that's great.
Anyone from India yet? No.
We often have quite a few people from India joining us too on these evening sessions. I think it's a good time for them in India. So we'll start in a couple of minutes, just waiting for people to join us. Alexandra and Polly, you can keep letting us know what's happening on the chat. Do encourage you to connect in the chat. It's also just say how you're doing today, right now, how are you doing? We're going to be meditating in a moment, so it's actually really good to just check in with how you're doing before meditation as well. Anyone else, Polly, that's tuning in, saying hi?
Alison in Surrey.
Alison in Surrey.
Okay, hi Alison.
Anne in Woodford Green.
Anne in Woodford Green.
Hi Anne. That's not far from me, Woodford Green.
Shobin, he's in India.
Shobin in India.
Hi Shobin.
Jai Bhim.
Jai Bhim.
Adriana says hello.
Adriana.
Hi Adriana. Nice to know you're here. So yes, do check in, tune in, say how you're doing, and we'll start in a minute or so. Just give us a few minutes just to arrive and settle into our space. Just in case you've joined, my name's Suryagupta. I'm one of the teachers of the centre. At the centre, I'm also the chair, and I'm with Polly and Alexandra doing our tech. So they're going to be talking from us from behind the camera. I'm speaking from home, and in the shrine room at the LBC, we have Devamitra, who I'm hosting this evening. I'm chairing this evening, and Devamitra will be giving us a talk, which I'm very much looking forward to. So in a moment, when Polly and Alexandra give us a thumbs up or the kind of calls out, then we'll start. Is that a thumbs up? Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So yes, hello again. A warm welcome from me. Welcome to our Monday Dharma night class. So for many, many years, we've had this class on a Monday night where a team of us gather and teach the Dharma, teach aspects of the Buddha's teachings. And we're going to, for the next 4 weeks, be having these Dharma nights on a Monday, for every Monday, teaching a different aspect of the Buddha's teachings or aspects of the Buddhist tradition. So tonight we have myself and Devamitra, and last week actually with 4 really important, if you like, really significant aspects of the Buddhist path, and particularly the path of full commitment, full engagement in the Buddhist life. And last week we heard, it was a talk about how to be inspired, how to be guided by teachers. And of course, the Buddha was the supreme teacher, as it were. We're still learning from all the teachings that the Buddha gave 2,000, almost 600 years ago. So he was a supreme teacher, but there'll be many, many teachers, many, many people sharing inspiration. And last week we heard about that, how to respond to people who can be guides to us. And this week we're going to be looking at friendship, particularly around how to be in harmony with our companions, even how to cultivate friendship, real friendship that actually helps us grow. And Devamitra is going to be talking about that. I was on a weekend retreat. I've been leading a retreat this last weekend, and I had people on who came along who I knew really, really well, and others I didn't know hardly at all, and all those in between. And it was amazing how within a couple of days, we all felt like friends. I felt like everybody there was a friend of mine on some level. And that's because we were sort of sharing ourselves, talking about our practicing together in a real context of, respect and listening and care. And by the end, it was amazing how much I felt I had got to know people, particularly people I hadn't really met before or only known peripherally. So how do we cultivate, friendships? How do we how do our friendships help us have more meaning in our life? The next 4 weeks, we're going to be looking at these 4 significant aspects of over the next 3 weeks, we've got 3 more weeks to go, including tonight, looking at 3 significant aspects of the Buddhist path, but particularly the aspects that help us have a meaningful, engaged life. And friendship is definitely one of those things, definitely a core element of feeling well and feeling happy and feeling like we're in relationship with other people that can really help us grow. So I'm looking forward to hearing Devamitra talk much more about how to cultivate friendships and friendships that help us grow, help us experience our lives in a much more richer, more meaningful way. So that's tonight's theme. And we're going to start with meditation to begin with. So let's get ready for meditation. Yeah. And because we're thinking about friendship and friendliness and how to have a more sort of meaningful, purposeful life and the role of friendship in that, we're going to do a meditation called the Metta Bhavana, a variation of that practice, which I'll lead us through. So do get yourselves ready for practicing. Thank you. Just get yourself comfortable on a chair, on a cushion. It's good if you can have your feet on the ground, your hands supported. And just take a couple of deeper breaths. Just take a time to just arrive in a meditation posture. You could take a couple of deeper breaths, breathing in. You might feel your shoulders rising and then breathing out. And let in any tension go. breathing in and out. And as you breathe out, really see if you can allow your body to relax into its support, into the chair, into the cushion. See if you can allow the body to relax and find a place of ease. You can imagine a whole body, particularly the lower half of our body, just yielding, softening. You can imagine it softening and feel it softening into its support. You can feel your feet on the ground. And know that you're supported by the ground right now. So experience the lower half of your body relaxing. Sometimes we hold on without realizing it, holding on to maybe muscles in our thighs. Just see if you can let them go right now. You feel your sitting bones underneath you. And get a sense of yourself softening and yielding into the support. And then the upper half of your body, you're from the lower spine, right through to the middle of your back, up to your shoulders, top of your back and shoulders. Just following the curve of your spine. From the base up to your shoulders, up to the top of your back. And branching out to your shoulders. And we often hold a lot of tension in our shoulders. So you can imagine as you breathe, breath flowing to your shoulders and just loosening any tension that might be there. You can imagine it flowing down, any tension, tightness flowing down from your shoulders to your arms, through to your hands and out through your fingers. Being aware of your head, poised, your neck and shoulders. Really experiencing softening your face, easing any tensions that might be in your forehead. And allowing your face to soften. Your eyes relaxing. Nothing for them to see right now. They can relax. Mouth relaxing. And then notice your breath. Notice your breath as it moves your chest and belly. Again, you can imagine or feel your belly softening. No need to hold anything in right now. Your belly can soften. Your chest area, your heart area opening. And just tune in to how you are at this moment in time. Just noticing if your experience is broadly pleasant or unpleasant, or somewhere in between. Checking in and allowing in how you are. There's no right or wrong. Just recognize what's happening in your experience right now. And it's from that place of recognizing how we are, of allowing in how we are, that we can wish ourselves well. That you can respond to ourselves with friendliness and openness. And you can say to yourself, if it helps, may I be well. May I be happy. And if you say those words, really say them as you mean them. And you allow them to touch you. Like a pebble going into a pond. You notice the ripple effects. So notice what happens when you say those words. May I be well. May I be happy. May I be free from suffering and its causes. You can also, of course, imagine yourself well and happy and free from suffering. Imagine yourself content, at ease, open, confident. What happens in your experience when you imagine that? If positive feelings arise, then stay with that. Just stay with the sensations of pleasure if they're in your experience right now. And if your feelings aren't pleasurable, then just respond. So you can respond to yourself with friendliness. Whatever's happening in your experience, learning to respond with openness and a kindly attitude, as if we're our own best friend. When I ring the bell, I'm going to move on to the second stage, which is bringing our friend to mind. So bringing a good friend to mind. Someone maybe roughly the same age as you, but mainly someone you have a straightforward connection with. that when you think of them, there's generally positive associations and feelings. Just choose one person. And as you bring them to mind, just firstly notice what happens in your experience. Again, if there's any pleasurable sensations, positive associations and feelings in your body, just staying with that, enjoying that and letting it grow. Taking our friend in. They too wish to be happy and well and free of suffering. They wish to grow and develop and be at ease and in contentment. So we can wish them that by saying the phrases, just gradually allowing them to have their effect. Or imagining our friend too, just maybe in a place that brings them contentment and ease. May be free from suffering and its causes. May be free from the causes of suffering, and may they make spiritual progress. If your mind wanders, gets caught into a story, just recognize that's happening and bring it back to yourself to begin with. Bring your mind back to yourself. Tune back into how you are. Maybe get a sense of your body. Connect in with your heart area. Just so you can, get a feel for how you are. And then bring your friend back to mind. So we have ourselves, our friend. And we're going to bring other people to mind now. You can imagine all of us tuning in to this meditation, sitting, practicing together. Just imagining people from all over meditating right now. Bring to mind those you might live with or in your neighborhood, people you might have seen today or might see. Colleagues, family members. Just expanding your field of friendliness and well-wishing. All beings without exception wishes to be happy, wish to be happy. All beings without exception wish to be free from suffering. So just expand your field of well-wishing to encompass more and more people. Those you know well, those you don't know so well. May all beings be well. May all beings be happy. May we all make spiritual progress. May we all find ways to alleviate our suffering and the causes of suffering. Beings on the land, beings in the sea, beings in the sky, all beings everywhere. May all beings be happy. Coming back gradually to ourselves. Connecting in with how you are. Feeling yourself on the cushion or chair, whatever posture you're in. Just getting that tuning into your body. Feeling your feet on the ground. Connecting in with your hands, another anchor point. Noticing any sounds around you. And when you're ready, opening your eyes. Thank you. So, well, I'm delighted now to have Devamitra speak to us about cultivating friendship, being in harmony with companions. Very much looking forward to Devamitra speaking to us on this. And there'll be a chance for questions and answers as well. So as you're listening, really just take in what he's saying, but obviously there'll be thoughts that are going on for you as well. So be thinking that too. And at any moment a question pops into mind, there's a chat box. So you can write your questions into the chat box. So Devamitra, over to you.
Thank you very much, Suryagupta. Thank you for leading the meditation. And a personal welcome from me to everybody present. I'm going to start by asking you to use your imagination. What I'd like to do, after I've checked the time so that I don't run over, is to imagine that a man has just died and he's about to be shown into hell. and he's with a valet who shows him into a room. And the room is decorated and furnished in the most utterly bourgeois and distasteful fashion. There's one statue on the mantelpiece which is absolute kitsch. And he looks around and asks the valet, so where's the fire? And the valet says, no, we don't do that here. So he looks around again. All he can see inside the room are 3 sofas. There's no windows. There's an overhead light. There's no electric switch or anything of that sort. So he's beginning to wonder a little bit, and he said, okay, so where are the instruments of torture? And the valet says, no, that's just an old wives' tale. You didn't really believe that, did you? So the man obviously is a little bit relieved to hear this. And it's slowly sinking in that this is what hell is. And he looks around again and he sees on a mantelpiece, there's a knife, just a paper knife, something quite innocent. And there's this dreadful statue. And that's all he sees, really. And he's quite intrigued. So this is hell. He says, yes, the valet says, yes, this is hell. You are in hell. And I said, but what about a toothbrush? There's no toothbrush here. The valet just laughs. You won't need one of those. Anyway, eventually the man settles into his new environment. And the valet says, look, if you need anything, there's a bell over there, just press the bell. And that's obviously going to be very useful. And the valet then departs. And after a few days, somebody else turns up in this room, and it's a woman. And this man and this woman don't seem particularly keen to meet one another, but they've been thrown together anyway. They're in hell together. They both feel that they don't quite understand where they're there, but anyway, there they are in hell. And then after a few more days, another rather younger woman, rather pretty woman, turns up as well. And it's not long before these 3 people start to torment one another through their words, or even through their silences, the things that they don't say. And gradually an atmosphere, a very, very tense atmosphere develops between them, almost to fever pitch. They can almost not begin, they can't even begin to imagine how they would ever get on. In fact, they seem to have a very, very strong aversion to each other, to all 3 of them, to each one to one another. So it's a very, very unpleasant sort of experience for them all. And all sorts of minor sort of little digs seem to hurt them or upset them. And in the end, well, things get really desperate. There's no way out. They can't leave. The light is always there. There's nowhere to sleep. And they can't even close their eyes anyway. And this is hell. And right at the end of this little sequence, the man has a major realization. It sinks in. He's got a major insight into what's going on, because he's been thinking about hell and what hell really is. And he says, hell is other people. The young woman screams at this point because she can't stand, especially the other woman, and she grabs the paper knife and tries to stab this woman to death. And the woman just laughs, of course. Don't you realize yet we're all dead? You can't hurt me. And at that point, the play, because I've just been summarizing the plot of the play, very, very crudely, I admit, the play ends. But this is a play called No Exit, sometimes translated as In Camera, by Jean-Paul Sartre, the French existentialist philosopher, novelist, and playwright. And anyway, you've probably heard of this expression before, hell is other people. So I thought I'd like to make that my starting point this evening. Not the most positive starting point, but it gives us a tremendous contrast with what I really want to talk about this evening. And so what I really want to talk about, as you've already heard, is friendship and how that arises, how we can develop friendship, I suppose. I'm not quite sure where I'm going to go with this, but no doubt I'll end up in the right place eventually. But before I do that, I want to tell you another story. This is a Buddhist story, a much more positive story. And in a way, I couldn't create a bigger contrast for you with these two stories. And the story is one which some of you will be very familiar with. It's the story of the Aniruddhas, so-called. And it's said on one occasion, the Buddha, in fact, not long after there'd been a terrible disharmony amongst a group of monks in a place called Kosambi. Shortly afterwards, he went to see 3 of his enlightened disciples. There they were living together very, very harmoniously. And he asked them, are you living in concord? Are you living in mutual appreciation without disputing, blending like milk and water, viewing each other with kindly eyes? And he addresses these words to Aniruddha, who responds and says, yes, we are living in concord, in mutual appreciation, without disputing, blending like milk and water, viewing each other with kindly eyes. And so the Buddha then asks him, well, how do you do this? How do you go about this? And well, I'm going to pause the story there, and hopefully I'll have time to come back to it later. I simply wanted to begin by giving this contrast of different kinds of human relations, if you like. The idea that hell is other people, of course, is not a very, very pleasing idea. And I suppose it's a very dark view of humanity. But sometimes, perhaps for us, perhaps there have been moments in our lives when we've actually felt that. And so you have this in the play, you have these 3 people trapped in a room. They can't go anywhere. It might sound familiar to 1 or 2 of you watching this. And this is the sort of thing that some people have had to contend with in lockdown. Perhaps they've been sharing a flat, a house with people they don't get on with particularly well. And there's not much to do. There's not very far you can go. You're stuck with each other. And perhaps you have different views about how you should be treating the lockdown rules and that sort of thing. I know that, well, I heard at least that when the lockdown was closed in Wuhan, in China, when all that calmed down in Wuhan, the origin of the present crisis, the place of origin of the present crisis, apparently there was a great spike in applications for divorce. So I think that, if that's true, I've got no reason to disbelieve it, suggests quite a lot about just how difficult it can be to experience others and how painful that is. And for some people, perhaps indeed, hell is other people. But there's a way out from that. And I suppose the way out from that is, well, not the way itself, but the sort of end result of that would be represented by this story of Aniruddha and the 2 other arahants that he was living with. They live in perfect harmony, without disputing, acting always out of kindliness. So clearly that's presumably what we would like. We would like to be able to live with other people in that way, because when there is disharmony with people, it's painful. We probably just want to get away from other people rather than actually be with them. Now, the key, of course, to approaching that goal, or at least part of the key, one of the keys, let's say, is the development of friendship, the cultivation of friendship. So the question arises, of course, well, where do we start? How do we go about that? I mean, if, for example, if you want some kind of romantic involvement with somebody, well, nowadays it's very easy. You just download a dating app. I've heard quite a bit about Hinge and Tinder and even Grindr. Not that I've used any of these dating apps myself. I'm far too old, of course. I'm on the way out. But a lot of my young friends seem to get very exercised about involvement with these dating apps. So you can actually get a partner or someone to spend time with in a romantic, etc. kind of way. But you can't just advertise, or there's no apps to get friends, are there? Perhaps we should be grateful for that. But anyway, you can't do it that way. What you can do, and what we try to do at the London Buddhist Centre, and also at all our Triratna centres, because the London Buddhist Centre is just one of many. We have centres all over the world, and many, many people involved, and of course, especially in India. But what you can do is just start coming along to one of our centres. If you do that, you may not have any idea in mind of developing friendships with people when you come here or when you go to some other Buddhist centre. Perhaps you just want to learn to meditate. Perhaps come to reach some sort of peace of mind, get away from all the tensions of your normal life. You probably don't even think in terms of friendship at all. I certainly didn't when I first came along to what was the FWBO Centre, the only centre of what is now Triratna in existence at that time at Archway in North London. I just wanted to learn to meditate. I wasn't particularly interested in the people going along there. But what slowly happened was that I kept going along to classes. I went on my first retreat, and very, very soon actually after that, I started living with some of these people who were going on retreats and so on. And gradually, over a period of time, I developed friendships with them. In the very early days of our movement, there wasn't so much an emphasis on friendship, or at least if there was, I don't think we were particularly conscious of it. It was something that we slowly discovered for ourselves. It just sort of emerged, as it were. And I must say I'm very grateful that I had that opportunity, even though I was not in search of friends particularly. I had plenty of friends already, as it happened, mostly from my work. Because I worked in theatre, and of course that meant that most of my friends did as well. What bound us together was our common interest in the theatre. It wasn't just the fact that we were all involved in the theatre in one way or another. We all had a common view of what good theatre was and what bad theatre was. So those ideas and our interest in the theatre, and the fact that, of course, you work in the theatre, it's an all-consuming job, really. I mean, you'd work all day rehearsing, you'd perform in the evenings and so on and so forth. So it's a very, very full day. And all you would think about was theatre. And I, when I was young, all I ever wanted to think about was theatre. But I realized eventually that it wasn't enough for me. I needed something else, something bigger than theatre, because the theatre just could not contain my idealism, I suppose. It wasn't big enough for that. I knew there had to be something better, but I didn't quite know what it was. And it was only really when I went along to the centre in Archway that I began to get a sense of that, something which gave my life meaning, even though I wasn't consciously looking for meaning either. I wasn't looking for meaning. I wasn't particularly looking for friendship, but that's gradually what I found. So what you have to do, certainly within a Buddhist context, if you want to cultivate friendships, is first of all, you just start going along to one of our centres. Very difficult at the moment, of course, because of the current lockdown, but that's not going to last forever. And even the LBC will be opening for a limited number of people later this week. And hopefully that will continue. And you will have opportunity not just to listen to the Dharma on your laptop or whatever it is that you're watching at the moment. You'll be able to come to our centre. You'll be able to, presumably with a little bit of help from social distancing, converse with people here, get to know them a little bit, perhaps form the basis for friendship, perhaps go away and retreat whenever our retreat centres open again, spend more time with people, keep on coming to classes, and so that gradually you get to know people and you begin to find that you've got quite a bit in common with them. In fact, you've got more in common with them than perhaps you'd realized, perhaps you'd ever thought about. But it's something which just slowly emerges. And the key thing in all this, well, there's a number of key things, but what probably the most important thing is that you're coming together on the basis of a common interest, but more than a common interest. Actually, I would say, common values. And of course, for us, certainly at the London Buddhist Centre, and for any Buddhist, those values are sort of typified or embodied in the three jewels of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. If, for instance, if I look back over my own friendships, what strikes me as being common to all of them, what bound me to my friends, some of whom are now lifelong friends, people I've known for almost 50 years, has been the fact that we share these common values. Without those values, the friendships that I've developed, and I now have many, many friends, some of them very young, some of them my age and even older. Without those common values, certainly the quality of the friendship that I now enjoy at this stage of my life would not have been possible. I had a very, very sort of striking experience which illustrated this for me rather painfully when I was in my early 30s, I think. I'd been staying in Boston for a while, Boston, Massachusetts in the United States. And I got to know someone who was a composer of music. In fact, he taught musical composition at Yale University. And he and I, we became very, 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 very good friends very quickly. We felt very strongly drawn to one another. And I visited his family in Cleveland, Ohio, and stayed with him at Yale. And he came over and stayed with me in my community at Pamaloka at that time. I was living in our men's retreat center in Norfolk. And he spent, I think it was a couple of weeks with us. And as we spent those 2 weeks together, the sort of underlying tensions in our relationship came more and more together. And the tension was there because fundamentally he was a Christian and I was a Buddhist. His spiritual hero, if you like, was Jesus Christ. My spiritual hero, to put it in those terms, was the Buddha. And we were never able to sort of separate this out. The fact was that ultimately we had different ideals. We didn't have in common the same ideal. We did to some extent. It wasn't completely that there was no overlap. There was some overlap, but the differences began to stand out for us more and more until in the end, we talked very, very frankly about it and realized that that was as far as we could take our friendship. We really couldn't take it any further. And so we slowly lost contact with each other over the years. But I think that was quite painful, both for him and for myself. I'd hoped that despite the fact that we had these different values, that we would still be able to remain good friends. It's not that we fell out or anything of that sort, but we realized it placed a limit on how far we could go. So I think if you want to develop friendship in any deeper sense, then you need common ideals. Without those, it's very, very difficult, if not actually impossible. And I think in addition to that, you need a common approach to those ideals. For example, in my own case, or in the case of me and my friends, not only did we share the same ideals, we understood them in the same way because we'd learned about the Dharma from Bhante Sangharakshita, the founder of Sri Ratna, the founder essentially of the London Buddhist Center. Because he was someone of a much greater understanding of the Dharma. He had a much greater understanding of the Dharma than we ourselves had. And we learned from him. And it was his sort of exposition of the Dharma which helped to bind us more closely together into a community so that we had a common approach to those ideals. And it's not that this was the only way to practice the Dharma, by no means. But if you want to form spiritual friends in a really deep way and go very deeply into spiritual friendship, which is what I'm talking about essentially, then you need to have a common approach to those ideals. Of course, it doesn't mean that you can't have friendships with other Buddhists. A very, very good friend of mine is a Theravadan monk from Sri Lanka who lives in Singapore. And I've known him for over 30 years. He's been a very kind, very generous friend to me for many, many years. And I visited Singapore many times and taught at the Buddhist library which he runs in Singapore. And he's a very, very good friend, but we're not part of the same spiritual community. But he is a good friend. I consider him very definitely to be one of my friends. But the friendship I enjoy with him it's very positive insofar as it goes, but it can't go as deeply as the friendships that I experienced through sharing those common ideals and having a common approach to them. So I think what binds those of us who gradually become friends in Triratna is the fact that we have these common ideals and the common understanding of those ideals that we've learned from our teacher and founder, Bhante Sangharakshita, and together with a common approach to putting those into practice. So this is that's what binds us. That's the binding agent, if you like, or they are the binding agents. And so inevitably, if you spend a lot of time meeting with people from, let's say, in the same sangha, let's use that word, the same spiritual community, gradually you want to spend more time with them. And again, that's something which happened with me. I slowly lost contact with my theatre friends, not because, well, basically because we just didn't, we had less and less in common. It wasn't that I stopped seeing them, but we just couldn't take our friendships any further. I think that's unfortunately quite often what happens. It's a very painful process, or can be a very painful process. And I certainly found it painful when I realized that was happening. But again, it doesn't mean to say that you can't also enjoy friendships outside the context of a spiritual community. Of course you can. I think it's actually important to do that. But inevitably there will be some limitation that, to how far you can take that. Yes, you start to become friends, you develop friends, you gather friends around you by engaging in this sort of way. And you can take that to different levels, I suppose. When I got involved with Triratna in the early years, I'd left my career behind. I really didn't want to pursue it any further. I'd had enough. I'd seen its limitations, and I wanted to engage with something higher. Even though I didn't actually think that way, essentially that's what I was doing. And it wasn't long, as I think I mentioned a little earlier, before I started living with other people who were doing the same. And that, if you like, intensified my involvement. It intensified the development of friendships within that context. You don't have to do that, I must emphasize at this point. You don't have to do what I did. I've never done things by heart in the whole course of my life. Whatever I've done, I've always done them sort of fully or not at all. Just seems to be a temperamental thing with me. But that enabled me to go further and deeper with my friendships. But the first and most disturbing thing that happens, or can happen, doesn't necessarily have to happen, but I've seen it happen so many times, is that as you get to know people better, as you become more and more familiar with them, what happens is that little sort of tensions and conflicts begin to arise. You may not want to talk about them. You may not want to engage with them. You may prefer to ignore them, but that doesn't really work. In fact, if these conflicts and tensions didn't arise, it would suggest to me that we weren't really engaging with each other. There are always differences between human beings. And somehow we have to find a way of resolving our differences, easing away those tensions. And of course, meditation can help us a lot in this regard, and especially the metta bhavana, the development of positive emotion, especially. But sometimes we have to face them and have a frank discussion with each other, give one another feedback even. I've got no idea how many sessions I've had with my friends when they've given me some very frank feedback. It seems to have been a theme of my life. Happened again just a few days ago, as it happens. And the important thing for me, and for anyone really, is always try to remain open to what people have to say to you. Always listen. I always try to do that. You don't necessarily have to agree with what they're saying, but at least listen before we start to argue back, and just try to take it in and work it out for yourself. Is it true or is it not true? If it's not true, if it is true, well, do something about it. Or at least I feel that I need to do something about it. If I feel it's not true, well, I can just forget about it. But there's always something that one is learning in this way. And this can be quite difficult. It's, in a way, the most challenging aspect of the development of friendship, allowing your friends to give you personal feedback if you need it. Because, of course, if they know you well, and I have many friends who know me well, they can sometimes see things that you can't see. We all have our blind spots. I certainly have mine. I'm aware of quite a few of my blind spots, but occasionally they trip me up. That's why they're blind spots, and I need to be reminded. And this helps me it helps me to become a better human being. Hopefully, slowly, my blind spots will be, there won't be any. I don't think it's likely to happen in the course of this life, but anyway, I think that's the way forward for most of us. So what this means is that sometimes there's a sort of collision between people as the conflict surfaces. And to, if I may quote my dear teacher, Bhante Sangharashtra, he said famously on one occasion, better honest collision than dishonest collusion. Now, of course, ideally, there be no collision. But if that collision is necessary, then sometimes we have to face this. But that's all what I've been saying so far is all a bit one-sided, because that's only one aspect of friendship. A very, very important aspect of friendship is the mutual encouragement that we can give one another in the way of expressing mutual appreciation, especially, for example, rejoicing in merits, which is a very important practice. Some of you at least will be familiar with this. Noticing the good qualities in others and rejoicing in them, pointing them out. Feeling glad that others have got certain talents and qualities which perhaps you yourself don't have, and being able to rejoice in those, and enabling others to rejoice in your own good qualities. Because everybody does have good qualities. There's nobody that doesn't. I really believe that. And if we encourage what's good and what is best in other people, well, that's how to create a sangha, a spiritual community. And ultimately, that can take us to the place that was enjoyed by Anuruddha and his two companions. So maybe I should move on now and just say a little bit about that. Go back to that story. So if you remember, the Buddha asked Anuruddha, well, how do you go about this? And he said, first of all, he said two things that struck me, perhaps three things, but they're very closely connected. The first thing he said was, in effect, he was saying, well, if I want to do something, I ask myself, well, but maybe I shouldn't do that. Maybe I should do what my friend wants to do. So he thinks like that. In other words, he wants to do what his friend wants to do, even more than he wants to do what he himself wants to do. And this reminds me very much of the training recommended by Shantideva in the Bodhicharyavatara. Shantideva being a great medieval Indian Buddhist poet who wrote this wonderful poetic treatise on the whole path of the Bodhisattva to enlightenment. The Bodhisattva being one who practices the Dharma for the sake of all sentient beings. And so in this book, in this treatise, he talks about the importance of putting others before yourself. Now, this is not a very easy thing to do, and I can't claim to do it very often. But when I have done it, sometimes I've found striking results. And one particular instance comes immediately to my mind. It was about 3 years ago when I was undergoing chemotherapy. And I turned up at Bart's Hospital, which is in the city not far from here, which is where I was being treated. And as I turned up very early in the morning, I had an early appointment. And as I checked in, the person at the reception said, look, we may not be able to treat you today because our computers have been down, are down. They've been down actually for the last 3 or 4 days, as it happened. And they'd had to turn many people away. Nonetheless, they took me into the chemotherapy ward and put a cannula in my wrist, as I normally did, in the back of my hand rather. And I just sat and waited. And after a while, I began to get really anxious. And I thought, well, what's going to happen if I don't get my treatment today? What will that mean? And I sensed the anxiety arising. And I was pacing up and down just outside the ward for a while. And it suddenly occurred to me that I'd become quite anxious. And I'd become anxious because I'd become excessively concerned about myself. And I felt thoroughly ashamed. And so I started to sort of tick myself off a bit. So what's so special about you that you think you should get treated before other people? And I reasoned with myself in this sort of way and went back to sit down in my treatment chair. Still no sign of chemotherapy going to be delivered. And as I did so, I felt a tremendous sense of peace. I felt that because I just relaxed. I let go of myself just for a few minutes. And the impact upon that was quite profound, I would say. Perhaps not lasting, but it felt quite profound to me at that time. So I think when we can, in circumstances like that, or in other circumstances, just relax our grip upon who we think we are and why we think we're so important, something quite wonderful can open up. So this is one thing that I think that Aniruddha, when he says to the Buddha, when he answers the Buddha, is he says this, he said, well, you know, if I might feel that I want to do this, but what does my friend want to do? Let's do that. I think this is a wonderful training principle. The other thing that, well, two other things that I noticed about Aniruddha's answer was that he said that he didn't use his words, this is my summary, but he clearly, and not just him, his companions were always trying to anticipate one another's needs, be aware of each other. So that, for example, I mean, to give a kind of silly, well, not silly, but perhaps everyday, common, contemporary example, you might live with people and they might leave the place that you live in a terrible mess sometimes, not do their washing up, etc., which can be profoundly irritating. But the attitude of Aniruddha would be, okay, the washing up needs to be done. I'll do the washing up. No conflict about it, no tension about it, just do it. Because it's not just his own needs he's taking into account, it's the needs of those he lives with. And so that also shows a great awareness of what is objectively necessary. There's something dirty, it needs to be cleaned. Someone has to clean it, why not me? I'm free at the moment, I can do it, let me do it. It's that kind of attitude. So this is Aniruddha and his two companions, if you like, represent spiritual friendship at the highest possible level. They're all three of them arahants. They've got nothing further to do, and yet they're still friends. They're still acting in this way. They're still viewing each other with kindly eyes. They're still performing kindly acts of body, kindly acts of speech and of mind towards one another. They do it unceasingly. So that's the ideal that we ultimately try to realize. And that's ultimately where we can lead. We may get glimpses along the line. Surely we will, if we keep on practicing, if we keep on developing friendships. Just keep coming along to the Buddhist center or wherever. Just keep doing the Metta-bhavana practice especially. Keep developing your friendships with those people that you get to know, trying to deepen them, going on retreat with them, even working with them if you can. And even if that from time to time throws up conflicts, as inevitably it will, throws up tensions, will you try to deal with them? If need be, even collide. Hopefully you don't do that. Hopefully you don't need to do that. But sometimes it may be necessary even to do that, to get to a deeper harmony, because this is what we're trying to get to. If there's just a superficial harmony where the difficulties and the tensions and the conflicts that we have to live with never get addressed, but we'll never be able to deepen that harmony. They must be addressed ultimately. Otherwise, you can't take friendship deeper, and you can't really take your spiritual life deeper either, I would say. Never forget that the Buddha did say on one occasion that the spiritual friendship with the lovely, friendship with the beautiful, life was friendship within the context of the Dharma, is the whole of the spiritual life. So I'm now hoping that some of you have got one or two questions. Or we can have another, sorry,
let's have
a tea break, aren't we?
Tea break.
5-minute tea break. Sorry about that, folks. Come back in 5 minutes. We'll all still be here. So have some questions?
Yeah. So Oliver wants to know, what do you do if your family don't share your Buddhist values?
What do you do if your family don't share your Buddhist values? Gosh, that's a difficult question. Well, I've got my own story to tell about that. Perhaps Suryagupta might have something to say as well. But in my case, no member of my family shared my Buddhist values. In fact, both my parents were very disappointed when I left my career behind, especially because I did that in order to deepen my involvement in Buddhism. study the Dharma, practice it more intensively, and so on and so forth. So that was very difficult. I don't know that I dealt with it in the best way. In fact, I'm sure I didn't. I think I dealt with it rather insensitively. I was young and insensitive at the time. I think I'm less so now, and I regret the sort of, well, I regret the fact that I couldn't make it easier for my parents. But I did, of course, try to make amends as I got older and realized that I'd not helped them. But I don't think in my case it would have been possible to interest my parents in the Dharma at all. I don't have any siblings, so it was just them really, and the wider family. I lost contact with them when I was young. So there was nothing I could do, at least towards the end of her life. My father died quite a bit earlier than my mother did. At least my mother seemed to appreciate what I'd done with my life. My father never could quite reconcile himself to what I'd done. So sometimes there's not much you can do. That's perhaps partly because I came from a working class, northeastern working class family background. So, you know, I had very little in common with my parents anyway, other than our common humanity. They weren't interested in the theatre or the arts in the way that I was. So it was difficult for me. It was never going to be easy to help them to see, you know, how important Buddhism was to me, and that it was actually a very positive thing. So I don't really know what you can do in a situation like that when your parents or your family just aren't interested. You can't force them to be interested. They may develop an interest as a consequence of seeing you change positively, if they can see that. But I don't know what else you can do, really. There has to be some sort of spark of interest in them. And if in the absence of that, I don't know what you can do. Do you have anything to add to that, Suryagupta?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, I had a probably different experience to you, Devamitra. Am I on mute? I'm not on mute.
We still can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Have I been put on mute? King.
Oh, well, maybe we should, maybe you can try and keep on trying to unmute Suryagupta. In the meantime, perhaps I can answer another question.
Okay. How do you deal with feeling ill will towards other people in the Sangha?
Well, there's an opportunity. How do you deal with that opportunity? Well, I think the first thing is to acknowledge that, at least to yourself, if not to them, and try just to, well, especially if they're involved in the Sangha, especially if they too are practicing, go out to them in some positive way, perhaps try and consciously make an effort to express some appreciation for what you perceive to be of good in them, if you can. That's the challenge. But don't forget, we all have good qualities. We all have talents and so on and so forth. So try to look for the positive. If it helps, you can talk with mutual friends and see if they can help you in some way. This is something I've done in the past, is talk to one of our mutual friends and say, look, I find so difficult because of such and such a reason. And you know, if it's one of those, my friends who knows me well, he can point out, well, you know, come on, Devamitra, I think you spoke a bit harshly to him and he feels a bit of ill will towards you. You need to sit down and talk about it and get beyond it, something like that. But the important thing is to acknowledge it to yourself and try to work with it. Always try to develop more positive emotion. And of course, the Metta Bhavana practice is particularly helpful in this regard. We can now hear Suryagupta, so we're going to go back to her.
Okay. So yes, I was mentioning about dealing with family who don't share.
You can't.
Well, apparently they can hear me. So I'm going to carry on. So we're talking about family that, you know, don't share your values. I think I had a very different experience to Devamitra because I didn't sort of look to my family to share my values, as it were. You know, they had their own sort of faith and religion, and what I try to do though is I wanted to show them what Buddhism was doing for me. So I wanted to become a kinder, happier being. And I thought if I can do that, then maybe along the way, they might at least respect what I'm doing a little bit more. And that's actually what happened for me. They began to show a bit of interest, or at least not try and be dismissive to what I was doing, because they saw the positive effects. So that was my approach, not to try and get them to have an interest. And that's the same with friends as well. Just kind of try and be a good friend to them. And I think Devamitra was talking about, you know, developing spiritual friendships within the community. And we do that so we can actually develop our capacity, generally our capacity to care and show an interest in others. And although we sort of practice that within the spiritual community, it's really important that we can then express that to whoever, whether they're Buddhist or not Buddhist, whether we like them, don't like them, we can express the sort of capacity to show interest and care for others. And that's what our practice is trying to get us to do, rather than have everyone, you know, exactly share our values. If they do, fantastic. But if they don't, we can still be friendly towards them. Yeah. And that was the answer to the first question. And the second question was around ill will. And I thought Devamitra gave a great answer to that, really, just very much around, you know, figuring out what is it that's going on that you're with you, that you're rubbing up against with the other, and trying to understand the other as well. And I think the Metta Bhavana practice really brings that element alive for us. So yes, keep doing the Metta Bhavana practice and keep talking to other people too about what you're discovering about the conflict, because there's always something in conflicts that reflect something about us or about the situation we're in, or about the other person as well. Usually a combination of all those things. And we want to understand it so we can free ourselves from that particular conflict. Is there another question? Some technical errors, I think. I'm not sure if anyone's actually what's happening right now. Okay, so is there other questions? I don't know what's happening. I can't hear anybody else. Write your questions in. I think I can see some of your questions anyway. Write some more questions in and I'll just try and respond to them.
Has developing Buddhist friendships influenced the other relationships in your life?
Has Suryagupta finished speaking? Okay. Hello, sorry, I couldn't hear a word that you said, Suryagupta. I've only just learned that you finished speaking. Anyway, sorry, could you repeat the question, please, Polly?
Yeah, so how have Buddhist friendships affected the other relationships in your life?
Have Buddhist friendships affected the other relationships in my life? Not really, simply because, well, is that true? Not very much anyway, because I've got very few friends who are not Buddhists anymore. I suppose more recently, I got to know a couple of actors. I did a play about 3 or 4 years back now that Gus directed. And Stiramanis directed. And there were 2 other actors who became good friends of mine. And clearly, the interaction between the 3 of us, the 4 of us, I should say, because Stiramanis was there, had a very strong effect upon them. They clearly enjoyed working with the 2 of us, and certainly Debbie, the actress I work with most closely, has become a very, very good friend of mine indeed. I mean, she's not a Buddhist, and I don't know that I have much influence on her, other than that we get on really, really well together. She's very talented, and I enjoy watching her. She's been working with the Royal Shakespeare Company recently at Stratford, and I go and see her when I can. But whether or not my friendship has had an influence, a positive influence upon her, beyond the fact that we become good friends, I don't know. I would imagine so. I'd certainly like to hope so. But they're the only 2 friendships, Debbie and Vinta, the 2 actors I worked with, who I could comment upon, really. All my other friends are Buddhists. Yes, Suryagupta, would you like to add? Could you add something to that? I hope I can hear you this time. Be nice to hear you.
Have I had a positive influence on my friends? I would hope so. I would hope so. I think one of the things that my friends talk about is seeing me change and grow over the years, and so they reflect to me sometimes, you know, how I've changed, and that feels, even though I can't say it's a direct influence, I think they've been fascinated by the journey that I've been on, and they're very affirming and supportive of the journey I've been on because of that. And of course, those of us who are those friends that I've managed to retain, as it were, we can share our different journeys along the way, and I think that's also really interesting and engaging for us. So I think in that sense, I think they're interested in somebody who's, you know, committed themselves to a spiritual life and interested to see what's happened, you know, to me over the years. I also have people who, they're not actually close friends, but they're sort of, I've worked alongside. And again, what I enjoy there and what we seem to enjoy mutually is just shared interests and passions for, we'll say, the arts. And although, again, I'm not sort of sharing my Buddhist practice in that context directly, I think they can see that my approach to them and the work we do is really informed by Buddhism. And many of them have definitely expressed interest, and they've tried meditation as a result. And certainly we keep having interesting conversations as a result. So I think it does have an effect for sure. Yeah, I think it does have an effect. And certainly it's who I've become. So in a sense, if they're still friends with me or they want to work with me in a way, they enjoy who I've become. And that is really a large part due to my practice. So got another question, Polly. This is a very interesting experience. Devamitra, I know, can't hear a word I'm saying. I hope that people listening can hear, and I can also see the questions as well. So, and we probably have time for one or two more questions. I'm going to look at the Helene's question. I hope that the Polly and Alexandra are okay there. And let me know actually if you can actually hear me. Great, I think you can. So I think Helene says, it's hard to understand the practice of the Metta Bhavana and rejecting people who are, was that the same question? Are they back on? So I can't hear anyone. Put your questions in there. I'll respond to your questions. If you put a fresh question in there, let's see what's coming up. Or maybe I'll say something about the Metta Bhavana practice, because the Metta Bhavana practice is a key practice for cultivating all the things that Devamitra has spoken about this evening. And in what the Metta Bhavana practice is doing is helping us, in a sense, have a really positive relationship to ourselves and understand how to have positive relations with other people and a whole range of people. It's helping us understand the barriers actually that get in the way of us connecting with other people. And it's also helping us appreciate the fact that we actually share a very common experience. We often think of ourselves as very different to each other, but the Metta Bhavana practice is kind of saying, yes, you've got lots of differences, lots of things that are, you know, unique to me, unique to you. But beneath that, we have this common desire to be happy, a common desire to be free. And if we can sort of see the barriers between us and other people, we can then realize actually they are just barriers, and we can remove them to that and see that sort of common desire. And it's from there that we can become a bit more friendlier, a bit more interested in other people, when we see that we're sort of all in the same boat, essentially wanting the same thing. So in a way, our friendships are sort of an opportunity, our spiritual friendships, an opportunity to really practice that much more deeply with each other, again, so that we can begin to sort of broaden out our connections to, well, as many people as possible. So I'm going to see, oh, you can all hear me. That's fantastic. Thank you, Fred and Maggie, that you can hear me. It's 5 minutes to go or so. Devamitra, poor thing, he's looking, I know he can't hear me. So I don't know what's going on there. I can't hear Polly or Alexandra either. But I do know we have a few minutes left now. You know, I think I'm going to close up our time together. Firstly, to thank Devamitra for, you know, a great talk. I think in the talk, Devamitra, he really looked at lots of very practical things we can do around friendship. He talked about being open to feedback, which is not always easy. That's a real practice, being open to feedback. But when you get feedback, really considering, is it true? Is it true? Does it bear relationship to my experience? And if it doesn't, you know, letting it go.
We can,
you're back.
Can hear you.
You're back again. You're back. I've been chatting away to everybody whilst you've been away. Apparently they can hear me. And I was just recapping on your talk, Devamitra, and the practical things you spoke about in your talk. You talked about rejoicing in other people, appreciating other people, putting other people before ourselves sometimes, doing the washing up because it needs to be done, you know, and actually creating a lovely environment for ourselves and others. There's all these things we can do to foster friendship, and just recognizing that actually feeling connected to another being is just so positive, you know, sort of so meaningful, so enjoyable, that we want to find more and more ways to do that. Okay, so I'm going to start wrapping up because it's coming up to time. I firstly want to say, help us. You can help us at the Buddhist Center. You can help us, you know, work out our technology. You can help us share these teachings. There's so many isolated people in the world, and you may also have found yourself isolated, you know, during lockdown as well. And actually, a spiritual community, really, it gives people the opportunity to become friends with each other and to discover the richness of friendships. And you can help us do that by donating. Help us find more and more ways to connect with, you know, the world out there. So we're currently losing about £10,000 a month in terms of what we would normally bring in. Your, you know, £50, £30, whatever you can give, £100, £20, really makes a difference to us. Really makes all of you contribute in different ways, helps us keep going. So really do, the donation link is there. Please do give generously. It's deeply appreciated. We're giving our time. You know, we're not paid to do this, as it were. We're sharing ourselves generously because we want to connect with people, and we want to connect with more and more people. It's the sort of bedrock of our practice. And the other thing to say is that we have, in the 2nd of August, we've got our summer retreat coming up. It's going to be intensive retreat. I'm going to be on the retreat. Quite a few of us will be on leading the retreat together, and you know, it's free, again, it's just by donation. And do sign up. There's quite a few hundred people have already signed up for that. We encourage you to sign up, get your place, and actually mark it out of your calendar as well. So that's two things: giving generously, contributing to this community that we have, helping us spread the teachings, share the benefits of our practice with each other, and then also joining in with the summer retreat. You do have to register for that, so do get your places on that. And lastly, I want to thank Devamitra. I want to thank our tech team. I want to thank you for tuning in and being patient with our technical issues this evening. I've really appreciated you sending messages and your great questions as well. So thank you very much for that. And we're going to end with, let's see, we're going to end with a short series of verses, which is Transference of Merit. And these verses are ancient text. And really what it's helping us to do is, when we do practice, when we do make an effort, when we do try and grow, we benefit from that immediately, but other people also benefit. And we want to kind of imagine all these people benefiting from our practice. So I hope Devamitra can see me. I'm going to put my hands together and he'll know that's a cue for our transference of merit. So just invite you to either say it along with me or listen. Transference of merit and self-surrender. May the merit gained in my acting thus go to the alleviation of the suffering of all beings. My personality throughout my existences, my possessions, and my merit in all three ways, I give up without regard to myself for the benefit of all beings. Just as the earth and other elements are serviceable in many ways to the infinite number of beings inhabiting limitless space, so may I become that which maintains all beings situated throughout space, so long as all have not attained to peace. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much, Devamitra, for a fantastic talk, for sharing your questions. I'm sorry we couldn't hear you after a while, but thank you all for joining in. We'll be here again next Monday, the Dharma Night team, but of course we have classes every night this week, so do tune in at 7 o'clock. Thank you. I'm looking at your messages in case you're still listening to me. Thanks, Helen. Shobit, it was great to spend the retreat with you just last weekend. Maggie, thank you. Paul. Frederick, thank you as well. Paul, Kevin.